Your Crisis Coach with Scott H. Silverman and Fredd Carroll. An addiction recovery and mental wellness discussion. Hey everybody, welcome back to Your Crisis Coach, the podcast that brings you hope, support, and actionable strategies for mental health and addiction recovery. I'm Fredd Carroll. That's Scott H. Silverman. We'll delve into inspiring stories, expert advice, the latest in mental health news to help you navigate your journey to recovery. So how are you, Mr. Silverman?
Well, Fred, thanks for asking. You know, I was just thinking, the news came today that Mexico got its first female president. And then following that, and that whoever was reading the line said, and she's Jewish. So I'm thinking, wow, Mexico's in real trouble now.
Yeah, what is going on with, well, first of all, that's a interesting mix to begin with. But I assume just like Catholicism and the Mormons are very good at it. Good news travels, I guess. You know, it just gets to these countries and you just choose your side, I guess. So,
well, it's interesting. And, and in Mexico, considering, kind of a macho world that's been, having a woman win is an interesting paradigm shift. And, historically, the way it works in Mexico, you don't like who's in charge. One of the cartels usually takes what they define as the appropriate action to make changes. So I'm excited for Mexico. And I think for the U.S., having a different leadership modality could be very helpful. We have such an issue with our border conversations. I would hope that, maybe they'll take a different position or different tact to negotiate with the U.S. to try to, get something going with the border. It seems like it's an ongoing stressor. We were talking about stressors earlier that people are hanging their hat on. It used to be you'd wake up in the morning and you try to, like you said, you try to pick something that feels good. Good breakfast, I slept well, a little meditation, some exercise, went for a walk, the sun's shining, and it's going to be a great day. I mean, most people, I don't think, wake up that way these days.
yeah, they don't. Have you spent time in Mexico yourself?
Well, I'm in San Diego, so we're a border town. I'm not Mexico City, but cross border, we probably 40, no, it might be 51% of our population in San Diego are Hispanic. So we have a lot of Mexican culture here. I went to school with kids that were bilingual, and because we're a border town, there's a lot of cross-border commerce, which has been very, very good. For example, 90,000 people, I believe, cross our border every day, come up from Mexico, generally to work or bring commerce or transport goods or services. And, so we're busy, if you will, with Mexico. And there's many areas very close to the border, maquiladoras, I believe they call them, where they're actually assembling, manufacturing, or doing things. And a big part of the labor force is as Hispanic. So, we've always had a great relationship with Mexico and a lot of respect for each other, clearly because we're a border town.
Yeah, I think similar to when I was a child, how confusing the education system is here. I have to talk myself away from assuming, for instance, because you hear so many negative things about Mexico, but then you got to think there must be some beauty to it. People aren't not everybody is poor. Not everybody is living in the streets, and what I meant by the education system, for years, I thought Russia meant waiting in line for bread because that's all I was taught in my social studies class. I thought if you lived in Africa, you lived in mud huts or in trees because that's what I was shown in the magazines or in the social studies books. I didn't realize they had major cities and millionaires and all this stuff. But that's as a young child, I'm talking, but that's what Mexico has started to do. You hear so many bad things. That's why I have trouble with the border stuff. I understand that bad people are getting it, but bad people aren't just getting in there. There's already bad people here. There's bad people coming in off from all coasts, all levels, from Canada. There's bad Canadians somewhere coming into the United States. But we hear so much negative news about Mexico, from the drugs to the stuff. You start to believe it. You really do start to, you have to check yourself to the reality of it.
Well, like I was saying, with the volume of people coming into San Diego, culturally, we have some very wealthy Mexican families here, because it's obviously, if they can do commerce on two different sides of the border, it's another whole business landscape that can be gotten. And I've always noticed the work ethic of the Hispanic family very similar to my faith, the Jewish people. We work hard, we try to, and we encourage our families to do that, do well, do better, and do better, do well. So I've never really seen, and again, we have people coming across this border all the time. And I think what's happening is there's people around the world that are going to Mexico to cross the border because there are things going on in their country that they can't take anymore. And they've found ways to, travel up and cross the border. There's probably people coming in. We just Ocean Beach. We were talking about that, I think, with our guest a couple weeks ago, that, a boat just comes on shore at the beach where everybody goes in the middle of the day, and 12 people jump off and just run into the beach community.
Right.
You don't just have a nice boat. Somebody had some money somewhere and they were anxious to get here. And, there's certain things you can do legally and certain things you can do illegally. But there's a labor force that's always come from Mexico, in my opinion, the immigrants who'd worked Central Valley in California, the wine country, and that labor force is not easily getting to the jobs that are out there that are needed, and others aren't picking it up. But I think culturally, we're a very rich family, and when you look at the level of connectivity, the grandparents, the great grandparents telling their children and having families, I think they're, and we, San Diego, because we're a community that's always kind of opened its arms. I remember after Vietnam, it was a huge influx of people from, the Vietnamese community and the Chaldean community. There, we have a very diverse community. We have a community center that has over 187 languages being spoken. So we have a pretty diverse community, San Diego, and it's 3.3 million people, and most part everybody gets along. I mean, we don't have the kind of gang wars that exist in other bigger cities. There's gangs, I know, that control things, but at the end of the day, I think we're lucky to live in San Diego. We have a very diverse culture, a very diverse community, and I think it's a good thing, not a bad thing.
To give me an idea, because I'm from such a small area in a small state, how close are you to downtown San Diego, personally? How close?
I live off of Mount Soledad, which is Pacific Beach. I'm literally 20 minutes from downtown San Diego and probably 40 minutes to the border.
Okay.
I mean, and when I grew up, we went across the border because you could drink as minors down there. I mean, it wasn't as monitored. And so a big part of my partying experience was in Tijuana. So I'm really close to downtown. San Diego's interesting. We're 3.3 million people, but you can get to the beach, the mountains, the rivers within 45 minutes. So we're kind of a compact little community, if you will, and right on the water. Obviously, we're a military town and a Navy town. So I think because maybe we've had that military influence, that's why we've had people from all over the country who either get stationed here or they serve their time. But we're the fourth largest military veteran population in the country.
So you must have grown up there. Did you grow up in a similar area that you're in now?
No, I was more inland, about 20 minutes inland from where I'm at now. And but it's everywhere. The culture's everywhere.
And what is in Mexico? What is their? I don't know this, so maybe you do. What's their political structure? Do they have, similar to what we have, a Democrat and a Republican, or do they have a political structure like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think uh, it's more of a it's I think it's a democracy with a dictatorship strong influence. I mean, they I don't know if they have the two-party system or yeah, two-party system like we have, but they have a voting system. Clearly, I mean, the new president's a female. You can't do that if there wasn't some form of democracy and fairness around it. So, and I'm sure there's deeper parts, southern parts of Mexico that are run a lot differently and a little more militaristic, if you will, and influenced more like by the major wealth influencers, and those are the cartels for because one of their bigger businesses is selling narcotics to the US. I mean,
Yeah.
and we're talking billions. But they have a Volkswagen factory down there and other car factories down there, and they make a lot of their own stuff down there. And they have a big infrastructure. And when I go to Mexico, it's usually Puerto Vallarta, Acapulco. I go more to the tourist areas or vacation spots. So I don't really get into the metropolitan pieces as well. I know they have charitable organizations, so yeah, they're pretty much like we are. I think everybody is, unless you're in a country that's run by an authoritarian,
Yeah.
leadership.
Well, just so you know, I did Google it real quick, and they are a three-party system.
Okay.
Mexico has a multi-party system since 2000. It's been a democracy. Their three parties are the Marina, the PAN, and the PRI. And that's all I could see on that. But they're a lot of it is similar.
And
Like for
those are acronyms for something else, right? The PAN, the PRA.
yeah, the PAN is the Party of Partido something National. And they're Christian humanism, conservatism, Christian democracy. They're considered a center right to right wing, so I guess they would be more Republican. And Roman Catholic religion, and that's all I see on that. So that would be
Well, there you go. Learn something every day.
yeah, it's definitely interesting. It's something that I'd probably be more interested in it today, sadly, than I was when I was a kid. Mexico didn't seem like to me, Mexico was a vacation spot, as a child. It's what people talked about from going down south and then, like I told you, I thought it was just a wasteland. I didn't know it was like a thriving nation because
Yeah.
they weren't teaching us that.
There is a look in Tijuana, just across our border. There is a lot of poverty. I mean, I say poverty. These are people living in shanties. They're pieces of recycled wood and tin, yeah, on hillsides. So there is that poverty piece as well that exists. But they can you know carpool together and cross the border on work visas and work and make a ton of more money here, and a dollar, not as much now, but a dollar used to go a lot longer, a lot further in Mexico than it does today. I don't know what the dollar is to the peso, but that's why so many people would cross the border to work, because they could get a minimum wage here, or at least close to it, and and they take it back to their families, and that's how they thrive.
Well, yeah,
Or
and the woman's name you're talking about, her name is Claudia Scheinbaum, is the new president of Mexico. She got 1/3 of the vote. So
it's interesting. Yeah.
yeah, there's been issues since the value the market collapsed a little when they named her and stuff, but it's just one of them things. It's strange how what you start to care about as you get older versus what you really care about as a child. They kind of teach you in reverse. The school system doesn't teach you how to pay your bills and how to maintain a job and how to treat people right to succeed in life and all that. They teach you about all this stuff that you don't care about until you're older, until you've worked and maintained a life. Then you realize other human beings matter in other areas.
Well,
So
and I've in all the work that I've ever done, one of the things that we focus on is life skills, just because, to your point, if you don't know how to do something and you've never done it, you can't pick it up through osmosis. You really need a mentor or a coach or a teacher that takes you a little further than just academia to be able to understand how to navigate. And hopefully you get that experience with your family. And if you don't get it from your family, the question then becomes, where does it come from? That's why a lot of people that are disillusioned, young people, used to go to the military. And it's like, and what the military's done is, when you're in the military, from what I understand, they take care of you. But when you leave, you're on your own again without any renewed skills that are transferable. I call them life skills. So I agree with your point. So
Yeah.
we haven't talked about, just to pivot here, that young man, the golfer that supposedly took his life. What was it, a week ago?
Yeah.
It's in the second round, went home, and his family found him, and I haven't heard any details this last week of what happened to him,
Well, I
other
guess
than
it was a carbon monoxide um
what it was.
suicide. Yeah, carbon monoxide. It sounds like according to his neighbor, what I had read, according to his neighbor, at around midnight, he heard, so which would be strange at midnight, heavy revving from a car with the garage closed. And then seconds later, he heard the whistling of the carbon monoxide detectors going off.
Mm,
And and they found him in his bedroom. So he must have put it through the vents of the house
wow.
or something, you know. But the deeper part of that is, I mean, he's overcome kind of, well, what he assumed as overcome addiction and mental health issues. He was a great golfer, um, little up and down in the sport, but supposedly on a good path. But that's the scariest thing about all these things, not just the golfer committing suicide, the girl we're yet to know about that's doing it right now, or the guy or the boy who came home from school and just had a bad day at school. And that's what's scary is you can't see it. You just don't see it. And people are very good at telling you they're fine. And I don't know if that's from us, our generation, raising our kids so in a tougher way than people raise their children today. I
Mm,
don't know what's right or wrong. I don't know if it's, I guess there's somewhere in the middle there. You got to be tough to get through life in these little hiccups, but it scares the hell out of me at times as a parent and my children, as far as I know, are fine. But what's their breaking point? I don't know it. I don't have that type of relationship with them where they confess everything to me. In fact, they get quite upset with me being so open and honest between my book, um, talking about my own suicide attempt and stuff like that. But I think that's more of not that they don't want to read about it and know about it. I don't think they want their friends. It's still something that will be talked negatively. Like, is your dad crazy? Is your dad this or that? But at the same time, I do get a lot of positive messages that can't believe how open and honest I am with certain things, even though I'm still very closed emotionally on certain things. I'm very basic. I keep it very close to home. So,
well, you're getting more transparent as I've known you. And look, when you understand these things, you'll find that people start to call, your kids will call you one day. My kids do that now periodically. They run into something, they go, what is the, usually it's a catastrophic event. They want to know what happened or how it happened. Or this golfer, clearly he was not on the mend, or he was on the mend but hadn't gotten there yet, because clearly there was something that wasn't right, and he wasn't processing it in a normal way that allowed him to move through it and get to the other side. Because the level of suicide rates they keep saying they try to say are going down, but I don't think they are. And I
Yeah.
understand that people are not calling the hotlines, and that's more anecdotal. I can't prove it, but you just when the governments are the ones that fund them, and you don't hear about positive experiences on the hotlines. Maybe they just don't share them because of HIPAA, or they just don't have them to share. So it's kind of hard to say, but just these are very unusual times, and when I say that, I feel like I should have a better way of framing that. It should have some more solutions for others, but that's just kind of the perspective I come with. And I had a mother call me the other day, and she said, she leaves the voicemail. I've had your number for about a year. I can't remember why I took your number down, but can you call me and tell me? So, you know, between the time I got back to her, it took an hour or two. She said, I Googled you and I realized why I called you. And, she said, I've had difficulty with my son. This and that's going on. I'm not sure what to do. And how old's your son? 38. I mean, 38. And she, as a mother, is still wrestling what she can do to help. So we talked about some ideas and some topical things that she could do. And more importantly, how to communicate without fighting with her son. But every time she opened her mouth, like we've talked about, sometimes parents just need to listen. She was triggering him with, fighting words, so to speak, or trigger words. And she said, we could never have a conversation. So I said, well, why don't you change it up a little bit? So she said, she'll call me middle of this week, let me know how it's going. And I said, look, I'll talk to your son. I'm not his contemporary per se, but I know how to respond maybe a little differently than you do. And the fact that I'm not your son's relationship, you're the mom. You're probably without the skill sets. Everything you say that you believe is going to help probably pushes his buttons. I said,
Yeah, I think speaking of communication part things and changing, the hardest thing, that's one of the hardest things I have, is readjusting to individuals. In other words, I'm usually the same on this level or this level or this level, but I maintain the same speed and same pace and same attitude, all that with everyone. But what I'm realizing is I have to learn to alter it, and it's hard. And for instance, with my daughter tells me all the time that, like, she'll abruptly get off the phone with me. Like yesterday, she was driving home from the Hamptons, and as she's driving, because it turns out she didn't plan far enough ahead, she didn't get a boat. Because if you just take the boat across to your home, I could see the Hamptons almost from the shore. And instead, she had to drive all the way around New York and come into Connecticut because all the boats were full. So I started automatically doing the parenting thing. Well, why didn't you do this on Thursday? Why didn't you do this? And she said I was causing her so much anxiety. And she's right about one thing. I'm asking questions that have no answer because the time has passed. It's over. She's already driving. She already missed the boat. Asking her for an answer to why she didn't do it Thursday does not solve the problem.
no,
And
and those are trigger words. Yeah, because she knows in her head you're absolutely right. And probably had she done it, you wouldn't even be having this conversation. But she can't change what has already happened, and
you know,
we do that as human beings. Yeah. So there's a thing I want you to check out. It's called motivational interviewing, MI, and it's a great skill set for communicating with people. Like what I try to do with my kids. I say, what would it look like if, or I'm sorry to hear that. How can I support you? Because fighting with them doesn't. But literally, my youngest was just here after working in LA for a week, and they came down to San Diego, and we were on the phone about a week before she was leaving, and I was saying, uh, I understand, because I know her. She's going to get her eyebrows done, her hair done. She has her people she's known for years, and then in the middle of the conversation, I mentioned the eyebrows. She goes, "Oh shit, I've got to confirm my appointment. I'll talk to you later." Just hangs up on me. Just hangs up.
yeah, I
So
see motivational interviewing techniques.
Yeah,
Uh,
you'll love
I'll,
that. You'll love that stuff because it's a logic model, and it was used. The guy that I know who runs the mental health department at UCSD. We should get him on here one day. But he was the one who instituted the entire training for the Department of Corrections throughout the state of California. He basically trained all of the wardens and the warden's senior staff, and then they brought it down to as low as they could to people doing intakes and assessments and the correctional officers, because it's just a great way. And I went through a 3-day training years ago, and it allows you to communicate with others without personalizing things, and to listen differently and to respond differently. And it helps because the only thing that I know I can control is my attitude. That's
yeah.
it. Everything else is out of my control, basically. I mean, obviously, if I want to make an egg, I can overcook it, undercook it, cook it. But I'm just saying, when it comes to life, and I was at my home group this morning, and the topic was gratitude. And I woke up a little angst, but by the time I finished listening to others, my attitude improved. And then I had an
Okay.
attitude of gratitude.
The human aspect, like especially with the kid, is it's always a struggle. I can't turn it on, turn it off, and then turn it back on with strangers. I treat strangers a little differently than I treat my children, and it's because of knowledge. I know the human, I know the attitude, I know what I'm going to get. But all I was doing was she's driving through New York, and I just made a comment, you're going to hit some traffic. And that was all I had to say for her to say, listen, I got to go. I'll call you later. Click, hang up. And later on, she said, you were just giving me no advice. I was sitting in traffic, and you're telling me I'm going to hit traffic.
You held the mirror up. That's called reflective thinking.
Yeah.
You basically reminded her that this could have completely been avoided, but she didn't avoid it because she either hadn't thought about it. And look, I don't know if you've ever read the book Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. I mean, that's a whole gender understanding of how we approach things too. And I'd like to think I'm a smart guy, but you know what, we all get triggered. And my wife's gone this week. She's up north with her sister and our brother-in-law, and our nephew's wife is having a baby. They're at a baby shower. And, my wife's checking in. I'm calling her just because I want to make sure she's okay and not walking around too much, pushing her leg injury. And, she's just like, how's it going? She says, oh, it's different with little kids running around. Yeah. And, think about this, Fred. How many years apart I am from my children, and I don't know how many years apart you are from your children, but there's a generation in there, a gap that we're. I try to. I'm not gonna. My wife wants to be the kid's best friend. That's not my role. I mean, I'll be their best friend, but I'm not going to try to be their best friend. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, it's very difficult too. It's from my point of view, raising my children, being both parents.
Right.
They didn't have an active mother. And a lot of people like to put pride into that, like, oh, I did it. I'm the opposite, because I feel pity. It's more pity for myself that I missed out on all the other things, because I had to, without having the proper verbiage, I had to be the asshole all the time. I didn't get the yin and the yang. I didn't have any balance. I had to be just the disciplinarian, their best friend. I had to learn, adapt. And from a male perspective, I had no natural ability of this because my upbringing wasn't anything special. It's not like I learned a lot from my family. And it just, it's something I still regret. So I still think the two-parent structure makes it a lot easier, because there's things I'm sure you could admit, there's things you still don't know. that your wife does, correct? You would agree about your children?
Well, there's a natural connectivity that she had that's different than mine, and yeah, I absolutely would agree with that.
And there are things you don't need to know.
Or
You know,
things I don't want to know. Yeah, so yeah,
exactly. Exactly. But I'm the opposite. I had to be that. I had to know everything. And there's things I know, which I'm glad I know, because other fathers are shocked when they hear my, for instance, birth control type discussions with my daughters, because I had to have those discussions. Did I want to have those discussions? Not at all. I didn't want to talk about her period. I didn't want to talk about stuff, but somebody had to.
right,
And you can't just sell it off to your sister every time. You can't sell it off. Eventually, you have to be the voice, and eventually, you become comfortable. And I'm very comfortable around women per se. Um, I grew up with three sisters. I raised, you know, a gay son and a daughter. Um, I've adapted so well to certain situations that I would have never thought of at 17 years old. I'd be adapting to.
right.
You know, I went through the 80s where I had to adapt as not that it was hard. A lot of people like to think it was hard or difficult to adapt to my son coming out as gay. That wasn't difficult at all because I love my son. There was no difficulty in that because it wasn't killing him. It wasn't, do I, people ask me, do you wish he was straight? No, no, I wish he was happy. I don't wish he was. I don't wish one way or the other because listen, I've met plenty of miserable straight people. It's not all that cut and dry. It's just a terminology. People are very brave around asking questions like that, like uncomfortable questions that are none of their business. First of all, and that goes both ways. I often tell my son that it's nobody's business what he does in his private life. So stop announcing it. Don't you what are you looking for? Nobody's going to throw you a parade per se because you're gay. You can't want to be treated as close to equal as possible and then, you know, throw your flag in the air all of a sudden. It's just not, just keep it to yourself, make yourself happy, and be human, be a nice person, be good. But I adapted in hindsight. Now I could say that here after years and years of this. This is 15 years I've settled with all this. But I wasn't always good about this. I used the verbs that you're not supposed to use when you're talking about gay people. I've used gay as a derogatory comment. I've used it in a joke. I've used it, and I never thought I was hurting anybody until it happened to me. Then you realize that it can harm. People don't understand that, I don't think.
To that point, was it? I think it was it Seinfeld? I guess the reruns are coming back in a big way, and there's a whole slew of negative feedback coming around. The language they use and how they spoke to each other, and that was during those times. That's what was going on, and there's heavy judgment. Then there was a joke the other day. Someone was saying that they were reminding somebody, their friend in Florida, that these are books, these are things that you used to have in your library, and people would reference, and people's sarcasm have gotten it's very cutting, very sharp,
Yeah,
very
and I
difficult.
agree. I agree with Jerry Seinfeld's that we do have to realize comedy is supposed to be uncomfortable. We don't know, because I like to think of myself as comedic because that's how I get by. That's my sanity. I don't do drugs. I don't drink very much, but comedy is what keeps me mentally balanced, is making a joke about a uncomfortable situation. And they're not all home runs. They're not all funny. They're not all proper. They're not all um, politically correct. But if I feel it's going to be funny, I say it. And then sometimes I regret it. Sometimes I'm like, well, you just didn't get it. But even Seinfeld, we got to realize that comedy, we can't keep taking it away. Eventually, we'll water it down to nothing. Being offended is, I mean, you've been offended before, but it didn't kill you. It didn't kill you.
And those, where they say what doesn't kill you will make you stronger. So I try to look at things like that as opportunity to better understand, my role on the planet, and just try not to personalize it. Put my feelings in my pocket sometimes, and just do what you got to do.
Well, I think before we end today, the one thing our discussions, mine and yours, probably are more easier for somebody that's younger to maybe feel. It does get easier as you get older. The things that are bugging them right now, it's experience. You have to experience the downs to get to where me and Scott are today. I think the way we're talking today is showing that tolerance, being tolerant, learning to be better to the next person or be more human, or to admit our mistakes, or to say I'm sorry, or say I love you, or say I don't need this person in my life, stepping away rather than harming ourselves.
Kind of like the golden rule.
Yeah. What's that? What's the golden rule?
Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you.
Yeah. Well,
but the last time I had somebody use that term with me, they said, the golden rule is those with the gold rule. Boy, that was a little offensive. I didn't really have a relationship with that person the day after that comment.
Yeah. And they're probably, too bad we're at the end. We probably can't comment too much more about the political garbage that's going on in this world right now, but we'll get to that next week. So that's going to be it. That'll be it. Scott, you got anything you want to say to anyone?
No, I just, you know what? Call me. I haven't heard from you. And if you want to talk, 619-993-2738. Let us know what you think. How can we make your day better? And what would it look like? And, how can we be of service?
Yep. And that's going to be it. So I'm Fredd Carroll. That is Scott H. Silverman. This is your Crisis Coach podcast. And if no one has told you they love you, we love you. And we will see you again next week. We think. We know. We will. We will. Definitely. We will. Actually, we have a guest coming up soon. So we'll be there. Okay, everybody. Goodbye. Your Crisis Coach with Scott H. Silverman and Fredd Carroll. An addiction recovery and mental wellness discussion.